want the very best schools. We want highways that are superb. We want a military that can keep us safe from terrorism. We want foreign aid that will help the world flourish. We want a Medicare system that keeps grandma and all the health care that she needs, Social Security that provides, good help for our seniors, good education. We want all that, and we want really, really low taxes. And I have two choices. I can either be dishonest with you and tell you you can have all that stuff, which is where we've been for the last 10 years or so, or I can be honest and frankly risk my job and say, guess what? You actually don't get all of, there's going to be some very hard choices to make around that stuff. This is an inherent this is an inherent tension in our system that we're going to feel for the next couple of years, federally in the state of Connecticut. But I am an optimist. I worry about two things as I look at our system. One is the permeation of money in the system. And unfortunately, I believe the Supreme Court took a big step backwards in the Citizens United decision. We should be finding ways to take money out of the system. At best, it's a situation where I spend way too much time raising money. At worst, of course, it's almost indistinguishable from corruption because big donors get listened to. We as a country need to figure out a way to fix that, and I fear we're moving in the wrong direction. The other thing I'm concerned about, and this is something that probably is interesting to think about, I just don't know what the answer is. As I reflect on the nature of the dialogue, and I close on this point because here we are in the context of a League of Women Voters event, I've thought a lot about the media. And I'm old enough to remember when we had three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and each one had their Walter Cronkite. And Walter Cronkite tried to deliver the news down the middle, and you didn't agree with him necessarily. You were on one side or the other, and you thought he was either a corporate stooge or a communist or whatever you thought. But the point is you thought, because maybe you didn't agree with him entirely, and he tried to sort of pitch it down the middle. We're in a world today where I fear that essential act of being a citizen in a democracy, which is educating oneself, has become less about thinking and more about entertainment. If you're on the left of center, you watch Rachel Maddow and she makes you feel so good. And if you're to the right, you watch Glenn Beck or whoever you watch and he makes you feel so good. This has gotten us away, I think, from thinking critically and accepting that these are tough choices and difficult issues, to absorbing information as a way of reinforcing prejudices and making yourself feel good. Because Rachel Maddow, really, I really agree with her. And those two things kind of worry me. I don't have the answers for them, but you should know that 28 months later, or whatever it's been, I actually would tell you that most of my colleagues work pretty hard, listen pretty hard, and in the next couple of years are going to go through a process of delivering some difficult choices to their constituents. So with that, I'm delighted to take questions, comments, whatever, on any topic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much for submitting these questions. We have some good ones. We are on tape, so everything has to be on the microphone. And therefore, I will try to take the questions in the order they came in, but I have segregated them, and about 2/3 do have to do with the debt ceiling, financial reform, and so maybe we should start there. I was so impressed to hear you discussing Simpson-Bowles because we hear so little about it. And one of our questions is, with both parties so interested in reducing the national debt, why have the recommendations of Simpson-Bowles Commission been ignored?
They have not been ignored. So the Gang of Six, which I talked about earlier in the Senate, they are taking the recommendations of Simpson-Bowles and putting it into legislative language. And here's an interesting fact. The Simpson-Bowles Commission consisted of 18 members, some senators, some congressmen, some House members, and then some non-affiliated folks. 11 out of 18 voted for it. All of the senators voted for it. None of the members of the House voted for it. Senators run every 6 years. Members of the House run every 2 years. Those are correlated facts. So what you're going to see is you're going to see the Senate produce a legislative proposal. I think the president will back it. And then what needs to happen politically is this. my party, the Democrats, need to be aware that there will be uncomfortable changes to Social Security, namely an increase in the retirement age. Simpson-Bowles proposes a 1-year increase in the retirement age over a period of 30 years, if I've got my facts right, 30 years or something like that. And we need to resist the temptation of, and it's very difficult to resist the temptation, but to resist the temptation of demagoguing this issue, of trying to scare seniors. Frankly, the way the Republicans scared seniors with the Medicare cuts that were part of the Accountable Care Act, and the way my party is sort of lining up to try to scare seniors of Ryan wants to take your Medicare away. It's not that simple. That's what the Democrats need to do. The Republicans, all of whom have signed Grover Norquist's pledge to never raise taxes on anybody at any time, to never do away with any loophole or credit or deduct, they're going to need to come off of that. And I don't know how or whose taxes are going to go up, but that's where they need to get. Saxby Chambliss, God bless him, said, and I think it was an exact quote, was, at some point somebody's taxes are going to go up because they recognize that and that's Saxby Chambliss, not Jim Himes speaking, that's the political dynamic. The Democrats are going to have to get over that hurdle, and the Republicans are going to have to get over this other hurdle. And when that happens, I think that there's a chance that this gets done in the Capitol.
I should have started with, can everyone hear me? Okay. You also had in your brief opening remarks comments about percentage of the GDP in taxes and tax revenues. And here's an interesting question. The federal government has increased its spending as a percentage of GDP from 19% in 2006 to 23% in 2010. What do you believe is the proper percentage for the federal government to spend in future years?
Yeah. And of course, that explains where we are on the deficit, because we're collecting taxes at the rate about 18% of GDP. Now, the economists will tell you that you can spend 19% of GDP and collect 18%. You can run little deficits for some period of time. In fact, in a growing economy, you can run deficits, controllable deficits, for a while. But obviously, where we are right now is unsustainable. In the near term, as the economy improves, tax receipts will go up. More people will be working and paying income tax. Corporations, as they are doing right now, will be making a lot more money and paying more taxes. And, of course, the reliance of vast swaths of the American population on unemployment insurance and other safety net programs will go down. So even if we do nothing right now, that picture improves a little bit, that we come off of that 24, 23% and come down, and tax receipts go up just because the economy improves. Where we are, where we settle, which is what your question was, really depends on what you want for this country. Once we get fully out of this recession, you need to tell me whether you want the U.S. to be the world's policeman in the next 40 years. Some of you think yes, some of you think no. And that's fine. Let's have that discussion. My point is simply this. We don't get to be the world's policeman, have enormously, robust benefits and entitlements, invest massively in education and infrastructure. We will make some choices. Personally, you know where I stand. I think that we can afford to cut our non-defense a little bit. That's the $500 billion portion. We can look to the $800 billion we spend on defense and security for cuts. And then we will look at Social Security and Medicare, which, by the way, doesn't help us in the near term, because nobody, and here's the opposite of demagoguing this issue, nobody in Washington is proposing harming current recipients of either of those programs. Even Ryan, who has a proposal for Medicare, which I do not like, and I'm happy to explain that, but even Ryan says my proposal doesn't kick in for people who are over the age of 55. So nobody's talking right now about in the near term changing Medicare and Social Security. But in the medium and long term, we've got to adjust the dials on those programs so that guys in their 40s have something as opposed to nothing. And 30s and 20s. And
that's a big issue. We are obviously in Fairfield County, and here's a question on commodity prices for wheat and corn at record high. Why does the government continue to spend billions of dollars on farm crop subsidies?
Because rural states have 2 senators. Look, I haven't mentioned these before, but one man's opinion. We've got no business subsidizing agriculture to the way we do, and frankly, we've got no business subsidizing extractive industries the way we do. The oil companies are enormously profitable. They don't need taxpayer dollar help. So if it were up to me, easy for me to say because I don't have farms in the 4th Congressional District, if it were up to me, there would not be agricultural subsidies. That's a lot of money we're spending. And by the way, we're making the problem worse with our policies, not just in agricultural subsidies, but we got off on a very wrong-headed idea, which is that we should burn corn in our gas tanks through corn-based ethanol, which we pay a fortune in subsidy to create. It has the effect not only of costing us taxpayer dollars, but it is meaningfully driving up the cost of food, not just here, but around the world. And when you scratch the surface of what's happening in the Middle East right now, which we'll talk more about, whether it's good or bad, but when you scratch the surface of what's happening in the Middle East right now, the rise in commodity prices has an awful lot to do with it.
Since we have spent most of the questions so far on finance, and you just brought up the Middle East, here's one that's deceptively simple and deceptively complex. Afghanistan, why can't we simply leave?
I've honestly undergone a little bit of a evolution on this issue myself. When I got to Congress 2+ years ago, I didn't have any real native expertise in what was going on in Afghanistan. I did visit. I spent some time there. And I've arrived and am getting increasingly adamant in this position. I've arrived at the point of view that we are not going to change Afghanistan. And we have a very ugly partner there in the form of President Karzai and his people. And every time I open the newspaper, in addition to reading those 2 or 3 24, 25, 26-year-old young men or women who have lost their lives over there, there's something like there was in the newspaper today, which is that 100 Taliban commanders escaped from a prison in Kandahar. I don't know if you saw it, but I'm done. I'm done. And I take the president at his word that he will begin withdrawing forces this summer from Afghanistan. I have always voted against the really precipitous withdrawal in 30 days. Dennis Kucinich put a resolution up to force a withdrawal in 30 days. I voted against that. I'm not quite there yet, but I become increasingly adamant as I reflect on the cost to our society, the low probability of success, and not just the human cost, but the dollar cost. Afghanistan and Iraq right now are burning $100 billion a year. And so you asked the question, why can't we? We will, because we simply can't afford it, and more people are coming to feel the way that I did. And by the way, I should add that withdrawing in 30 days is not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to withdraw, but to retain a presence in the region, because Pakistan is a very, very dangerous place. And so we need to retain the ability to project force into Pakistan. I'm no military strategist, but here's a non-military strategist point of view. Let's keep 2 bases in Afghanistan from which we can influence events in Pakistan and leave the rest of the country up to the Afghanis. I guess I'm not going to lose on that one.
I'll give you one more on the same part of the world. Will the U.S. commit troops to Libya, and should they? Should we?
The president has said he will not commit troops to Libya, and no, we shouldn't. No, we shouldn't. I'm honestly torn in a couple of directions on Libya. On the one hand, long run, deep thinking stuff. Now that I'm actually in the process, I have developed a respect for the fact that over 60 years, we've developed a tradition that I think probably is not a good one, which is that presidents can go to war contrary to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which says that we get to choose it, to go to war. Now, I understand that in moments of, attack and whatnot, you give the president some space, but I just can't help look back over those 60 years and say we ought to have more congressional participation along the lines of the Constitution. That's a big and long-term fight. When I woke up and heard that the president had committed troops to Libya, I was, or committed not troops, but air power. I was very concerned and disturbed. I thought, oh my God, here it is, country number 3, Islamic nation. And I still feel that way, and I still feel that I want us out of there as soon as possible. Now, NATO's in charge, the Arab League is, Qatar has its 2 fighter jets and whatnot. That's all good stuff. I want us out. I don't criticize the president intensely on this issue because I went back to Washington after the decision was taken. There was a classified briefing in which the brass showed what Gaddafi's plans were to have been for Benghazi had he taken Benghazi. And there's no doubt in my mind that there are 10, 20, 30,000 people alive today because of the U.S. commitment of air power that would not be alive otherwise. And so my criticism of the president is very muted on this issue, but I do want us out as soon as possible.
I'm sure we could go on Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, but I'm trying to get a fair representation of the questions that everyone put forward. Is there any hope of campaign finance reform given the citizens' decision? And I thought that was relevant since you had already raised the issue.
Yeah. I've been a co-sponsor now in 2 Congresses of John Larson of Connecticut's bill, which would create public financing of senatorial and congressional races. And I'm an adamant proponent, as you sensed from my earlier comments, of this. It's complicated, in all honesty, by the fact that Barack Obama, Democratic President of the United States, actually sidestepped the public financing system when he ran for office. That makes it hard to speak with as clear a voice as I would like to speak, or that he would probably like to speak on this issue. But unfortunately, I would say that the probability we're going to get meaningful things done is low. We tried in the last Congress, subsequent to Citizens United, which allows, as you know, unlimited corporate donations into the system to buy ads to fight me or to help me, and by the way, unlimited union donations as well. We tried to pass a bill called the Disclose Act, which simply would have required the corporations who now have a apparently constitutional right to do this, and the unions that have a constitutional right to, it would simply have required them to disclose who they were. And it would have forbidden foreign entities from being part of that, and we got it through the House, but we couldn't get it through the Senate. That is unfortunately my sad answer to your question. We couldn't even get that done. And so I fear that legislatively we're in a little bit of gridlock, and as a government we're in a very difficult spot because the Supreme Court at its heart has equated money with speech. Now there's lawyers in the room who know that it's a much more complicated dynamic than that, but as long as money is equated with speech, the First Amendment will protect the right of people to spend money in the political arena. It's sad, and I don't have a good answer other than I just hope that we collectively as the American people will demand reform.
Your response begs the answer to this question. We have someone who's interested in gun control legislation. Are you involved with any gun control legislation? And if not, do you have any plans to propose or support gun control bills?
There are things I'm optimistic on. We've touched on 2 that I'm not. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill in the House which is going nowhere, as it went nowhere in the state of Connecticut and Hartford.